Imagine God telling you to leave everything behind, your home, your family, your land, and head off to a completely unknown place. Now imagine doing that at 75 years old, with no GPS, no maps, no guarantees, just a voice and a promise. This is the story of a man who lived to be 175 years old, fathered a son at 100, and nearly sacrificed him at the altar. A man who lied about his wife, caused plagues in Egypt, and still became the father of billions of people around the world. If you think you know the story of Abraham, brace yourself. Because what I'm about to reveal about the father of the world's 3 largest religions will completely change your perspective on faith, obedience, and the value of God's promises. Leave your homeland and your father's house, and go to the land I will show you. A voice echoed in the silence of my heart, a voice that, although invisible to the ear, was clearer and more powerful than the roar of any storm. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And through you all the peoples of the earth will be blessed. These were the words of the Lord that resonated in my being, marking the beginning of my story. I am Abraham, born like Abram in Ur of the Chaldees, a prosperous city in Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers nourish the land with life. My father, Terah, was a respected man, but our lives were ordinary, marked by the seasons and rituals of a polytheistic society. The divine call was both an awakening and a breakthrough. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. How could someone like me, a mere mortal among so many, be chosen for such a destiny? The promise was as overwhelming as the night sky beneath which I stood, and it is here, at 75 years old, that my incredible story begins, when I decided to overcome my fear and embark on the journey. I never imagined I'd live to be 175 or have such a large family. This is where my story begins. With a heart full of hope and a budding faith, I obeyed the Lord and set out with my wife Sarai, Lot, my nephew, all our possessions, and the people we had gathered. We headed toward the land of Canaan. It was a hopeful journey, guided by divine promise. We traveled northwest through Haran and finally arrived in Canaan, a land of rolling hills and fertile valleys. It was a diverse region, inhabited by Canaanite villages and fortified city-states, each ruled by its own king. Life in Canaan was different from that in Ur. Here, fields and vineyards stretched as far as the eye could see, and the scent of olive and fig trees permeated the air. We discovered that, although the land before us was rich and promising, it was inhabited by other peoples and cultures. I traveled through the land to the holy place of Shechem, under the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites possessed that land. It was there that the Lord appeared to me again and promised, "To your descendants I will give this land." In honor of him and his promise, I erected an altar at that holy place. Then I moved to the hill country east of Bethel, and between Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, I pitched my tent. There I also built an altar to the Lord and called upon his name, marking each place of my pilgrimage with an act of faith and devotion. However, the test of our faith was not long in coming. The promised land, which had welcomed my steps under the blessing of a divine promise, soon became inhospitable under the yoke of a severe famine. "Why have you brought us to this place?" I asked myself, looking to the sky for answers. The decision to leave for Egypt, the land of the Nile and its full granaries, was made with regret, knowing that it was testing the Almighty's promise to take care of me and my family. "Fear not, Abram," the promise echoed. "I am your shield. Your reward will be very great." Still aware of Sarai's beauty and fearing for my life, I devised a plan. I asked her to pretend to be my sister. That way they'll treat me well for you, and for you, they'll spare my life. In fact, upon arriving in Egypt, Sarai's beauty captivated everyone, even the officials in Pharaoh's court, and she was taken to his palace. Thanks to her, I received special treatment: sheep, cows, donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. My stay in Egypt was marked by the dissonance between the opulence of the palaces and the enslavement of many of its inhabitants. However, the Lord inflicted great evils on Pharaoh and his people because of Sarai. Pharaoh, upon understanding the truth, confronted me. "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she was your sister, allowing me to take her as my wife? Here is your wife. Take her and go." After that, he ordered his men to escort us out, along with Sarai and all our possessions. When we were expelled from Egypt, we not only returned to Canaan with more than we had brought with us, but also with a deeper understanding of the nature of our God, a protector, a provider, an unfailing guide in times of uncertainty. From Egypt I went up to the Negev with my wife and all our possessions, and Lot was with us. Thanks to God's blessing, I had accumulated great wealth in livestock, silver, and gold. We continued our journey north, returning to Bethel, the site of our first encampment between Bethel and Ai, where I had previously built an altar to the Lord, and where I again called on his name. Lot, who was with me, also had sheep, cattle, and tents. Our possessions had grown so large that there was no longer enough space for us and our flocks, which led to conflicts between my herdsmen and Lot's. At that time, the territory was inhabited by the Canaanites and the Perizzites, which further complicated the situation. To avoid disputes and maintain peace, I proposed a solution to Lot. There must be no conflict between us and our herdsmen, for we are family. Look, the whole land is before you. If you choose to go to the left, I will go to the right. If you prefer to go to the right, I will go to the left. Lot observed the Jordan Valley, which was a fertile land similar to the Garden of the Lord, or Egypt before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So he chose the entire lower Jordan region and moved eastward, separating us physically. I remained in Canaan while Lot settled near Sodom, whose inhabitants were known for their wickedness and sin against the Lord. After Lot and I parted, the Lord spoke to me again, reaffirming his promise. Look up from where you are northward, southward, eastward, and westward. All the land you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants as numerous as the dust of the earth. If anyone could count the dust, they could count your descendants. Following the Lord's command, I traveled far and wide throughout the land, mindful of the divine promise I had been given. Finally, I moved my camp and settled by the oaks of Mamre and Hebron, where I erected another altar to the Lord, marking a new beginning and a sacred place of worship and communion with him. One day, the Lord appeared to me as I sat at the entrance of my tent in the oak grove of Mamre, at the time when the sun shone most brightly. When I looked up, I saw 3 men standing near me. Without hesitation, I ran toward them from the entrance of my tent and bowed to the ground in a sign of respect and hospitality, saying, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not pass by or stop before your servant." I immediately went to the tent where Sarah was and urgently ordered, "Quickly, take 3 seahs of the best flour, knead it, and make bread." So I ran to the stable, selected a tender, well-fed calf, and handed it to a servant to prepare without delay. I served curds, milk, and the prepared calf to our guests, and I stayed with them under the tree while they ate. It was then that they asked me about Sarah, my wife, and I told them I was in the tent. One of them, whose words carried the weight of a divine promise, said, "I will surely come to you next year, and by then Sarah will have given birth to a son." Sarah, listening from the tent door, laughed to herself, incredulous at the thought of experiencing the joys of motherhood in our old age. The Lord, seeing Sarah's laughter, asked me, "Why does Sarah laugh, thinking that she cannot bear a son in her old age? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? When I return to you around this time next year, Sarah will have given birth to a son." Sarah, afraid, denied having laughed, but the Lord told her, "Yes, you did laugh." After the men departed for Sodom, I reflected on the divine purpose and prepared to take my leave. The Lord shared his plans with me, considering whether he should conceal from me what was about to happen in Sodom and Gomorrah, since I would be the founder of a great and blessed nation, chosen to teach justice and righteousness to my descendants. With the imminent destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, I approached the Lord, pleading for the city. "Will you destroy the righteous along with the wicked? If there are 50 righteous people in the city, will you destroy it anyway?" The Lord promised, that he would spare the city for the sake of the 50 righteous. My concern for justice prompted me to intercede even further, reducing to 10 the number of righteous people needed to save the city from destruction. The Lord, in his mercy, agreed not to destroy it if he found these 10 righteous people. When the 2 angels arrived in Sodom that night, my nephew Lot was sitting at the city gate. Upon seeing them, he stood up to meet them, showing respect and bowing down to the ground. However, the crowd rejected him and threatened to treat him worse than the others. When they tried to enter, the angels intervened, saving Lot and blinding the attackers so they couldn't find the gate. The angels then revealed to Lot the purpose of their visit, the imminent destruction of Sodom due to its great wickedness. They urged Lot to gather his family and leave the city. Lot tried to warn his sons-in-law, but they didn't take him seriously. At dawn, while Lot hesitated, the angels took him by the hand, along with his wife and daughters, and led him out of the city by the Lord's mercy. Once safe, the angels warned Lot to flee to the mountains without looking back. When the sun rose and Lot reached Zoar, the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah with sulfur and fire from heaven. Lot's wife, disobeying the command not to look back, turned into a pillar of salt. The next morning I returned to the place where I had stood before the Lord, watching in horror as the smoke of destruction rose from the ground. Although divine judgment had fallen upon Sodom and Gomorrah, the Lord remembered his promise and saved Lot, a testimony to divine justice and mercy, even in the midst of judgment. From there I moved to the Negev, settling between Kadesh and Shur, and finally arrived at Gerar, where I decided to stay for a while. As I had done on previous occasions, fearing that my life might be in danger because of Sarah's beauty, I said she was my sister. Abimelech, king of Gerar, heard this and had Sarah brought to his palace. However, that night, God intervened dramatically. He appeared to Abimelech in a dream and warned him that he was about to make a grave mistake by taking Sarah, for she was my wife. The Lord visited Sarah and me miraculously, fulfilling his promise in a way that exceeded all our expectations. Sarah conceived and bore me a son in my old age, just as God had promised. When our son was born, I named him Isaac, always obeying God. 8 days after his birth, I circumcised Isaac, faithfully following God's instructions. At that time, he was 100 years old, a testament to God's power and faithfulness. Sarah, overjoyed, exclaimed, "God has given me something to laugh about, and everyone who hears about it will laugh with me." We never imagined that in our old age we would have the joy of having a child. The day Isaac was weaned, I celebrated the beginning of a new phase in our lives with a grand feast. However, not everything in our family was cause for celebration. One day Sarah saw Ishmael, the son Hagar the Egyptian had borne me, mocking Isaac. This led her to ask me to send Hagar and her son away, as she didn't want Ishmael to share the inheritance with Isaac. This request pained me deeply, for Ishmael was also my son. But God intervened and said to me, "Do not worry about the child or your slave woman. Do as Sarah tells you, for through Isaac your descendants will be known. But I will also make a nation from the slave woman's son, for he is your descendants." With a heavy heart, but trusting in God's promise, I prepared Hagar and Ishmael for their departure, providing them with provisions for the journey, and saying goodbye to them at dawn. After these significant events in my life, one day God decided to test me. "Abraham," he called. "Here I am," I responded, always ready to hear his voice. It was then that he gave me an instruction that would make any father's heart tremble. "Take your only son Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the region of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering on the mountain that I will show you." I can't describe the storm of emotions that swept over me at that moment. However, with unwavering faith in God, I got up early the next day, saddled my donkey, and together with 2 of my servants and my beloved son Isaac, we set off. I cut wood for the sacrifice, and we headed to the place God had designated. On the 3rd day of our journey, I could see from afar the destination we were meant to reach. I told my servants to wait with the donkey while Isaac and I continued onward. "We will worship and then return," I assured them, although I felt great regret for what I knew I must do. I carried the wood for the burnt offering over Isaac, while I carried the fire and the knife. We walked together, father and son, in a silence filled with apprehension. Finally, Isaac broke the silence by asking me where the lamb for the sacrifice was. "God will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son," I replied with a faith I hardly understood how I maintained. When I arrived at the place God had told me to, I built an altar, laid out the wood, and broken-hearted, bound Isaac and placed him on the altar. As I reached out to take the knife and do as I had been commanded, a voice from heaven stopped me. "Abraham! Abraham!" It was the angel of the Lord calling me. "Here I am," I replied, and the angel instructed me not to harm the child, thus demonstrating my genuine fear of God, having not withheld my only son. Then I looked and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. I took it and offered it as a burnt offering in place of my son. I named that place "The Lord Will Provide," a declaration that became a testimony to God's provision and faithfulness. The angel of the Lord blessed me a second time from heaven, promising me countless descendants and blessings for obeying his voice. But there's something few people know about this story. Ancient Jewish tradition preserves fascinating details about what really happened on that mountain. Some ancient texts suggest that Isaac was not just a child, but a young adult who voluntarily submitted to the sacrifice, with full knowledge of God's will. Others relate that at the precise moment I raised the knife, the heavens opened and the angels wept before God's throne. There are also reports that this same Mount Moriah would be the place where the Temple of Jerusalem would be built in the future, and where, centuries later, another son would be offered as a sacrifice, this time consummated for the salvation of all humanity. I returned to my servants, and together we returned to Beersheba, where I continued to live, reflecting on the profound lesson of faith and obedience that God had taught me on Mount Moriah. Sarah, my beloved wife, lived 127 years. Her death in Kiriath Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan, left me deeply saddened. I wept and mourned, feeling the emptiness her passing left in my life. After leaving the place of her death, I went to the descendants of Heth. I remained among them as a foreigner without a land of my own. I said to them, "Although I am only a foreigner residing among you, please give me a place to bury my wife." The response of the descendants of Heth was a testament to the esteem they held for me. "My lord, you are a prince of God among us. Choose the best of our tombs to bury your wife. None of us will deny you his tomb for this purpose." Grateful for their offer, I stood and paid my respects. Then I asked their intercession with Ephron, son of Zohar, to purchase the cave of Machpelah, located at the end of their field. I wanted to acquire it at a fair price to establish a family tomb among them. Ephron, who was present at the meeting, generously offered the field and the cave in front of all those present, saying, "I give it to you in the presence of my fellow citizens. Bury your wife." So Ephron's field at Machpelah, along with the cave and everything in it, became my property, formally acquired in the presence of the community leaders. There I buried Sarah, marking the field at Machpelah, opposite Mamre in Canaan, as the family tomb. After Sarah's death, my heart found comfort and companionship in Keturah, the woman I married. She blessed me with more children: Zimran, Jokshan, Midan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua, expanding the family God promised me. To Isaac, the son of promise I had with Sarah, I bequeathed all my possessions, thus fulfilling what God had established. To the children I had with Keturah and Hagar, I gave gifts, and seeking to preserve peace and fulfill God's will, I sent them east to the eastern regions, far from Isaac. It was a difficult decision, guided by my desire to follow God's plan for Isaac, whom he had designated as the bearer of the promise. I lived 175 years, a life filled with challenges and blessings, marked by my relationship with God and my commitment to his commandments. When my time came, I died peacefully, content with the life I had lived, and I rejoined my ancestors, leaving a legacy of faith and obedience. My story is not only about the blessings I've received, but also about the trials I've faced. It's not only about the miracles I've witnessed, but also about the moments of doubt and fear I've overcome. It's a story of radical trust in the midst of uncertainty, of obedience when it makes no sense, of hope against all hope. I made mistakes. I lied about my wife twice. I doubted God's promise and tried to fulfill it on my own through Hagar. But despite every failure, God remained faithful. Despite every detour, He brought me back on track. Today, billions of people around the world, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, call me Dad. But I was just an imperfect man who chose to say yes to a perfect God. A man who learned that true greatness lies not in never falling, but in always rising and moving toward the promise. If my story inspires you, know that the same God who called me in Ur of the Chaldees continues to call me today. He continues to seek men and women willing to step out of their comfort zones and embark on a journey of faith. The question is, are you willing to say, "Here I am"? I hope this story inspires future generations to trust God and follow His ways, as I did. If you liked my story, you should hear the one about my grandson Jacob, who would become the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. May God bless you and make you a blessing to others, as He has made me. Remember, sometimes the greatest journey begins with a step of faith into the unknown.